My name is Roy Luce with the Polk County School Board. I work for Maintenance Services. We've been conducting tests and repairs over this past week on the water samples that came back elevated. Out of the 5 schools that we tested, 1 was completely cleared on the initial testing. 2 since then, Cleveland Court and Edwin Elementary, have been cleared. There was minor repairs made to the fixtures that were in question, and those have been released as well. Currently, we have 1 sample remaining at Winston Elementary that's elevated, and we have 4 samples at Union Academy that remain elevated. Between the testing that was done on the second round, we had gone into the schools and we had made adjustments to how the sample was taken. We ensured that the aerator and the faucets were working properly when the second sample was drawn. But between then and last week, we've gone in and replaced all the fixtures on all 17 locations back to the wall. So they're repiped, the valve stop, the fixture itself, everything has been replaced. And we're confident that when we conduct the test on these remaining 5 samples, that they will come back cleared.
Which school was that?
There's 1 sample at Winston Academy, and there were 4 samples at Union Academy.
What were the readings?
They came down significantly. We've posted this to the website, the link that was posted this morning. It's easier if I go back to the sample.
When you talk about samples, are you talking about sources like fountains, or just maybe 4 samples from the same source?
No, 1 sample from 1 source location.
So in other words, at Union Academy, there are still 4 either
There-
fountains or something that need to be fixed?
Yes, sir. There are.
But you're saying you fixed them and you're hoping that that's going to bring the results back clear?
Between the first and second round of testing, we made minor adjustments, simple repairs, making sure that the aerator is clean, it wasn't clogged, make sure the fixture was running correctly, that it had been in use, and so forth. So when they took the second round of tests, we hadn't started actually replacing components. But between that second test and today, all of these components have been completely replaced. The faucets, the bubblers, the water coolers, all the piping, everything that goes back to where it enters the wall. And then we're going to conduct a final set of tests. And like I said, these initial 5 schools were a test sample to figure out the how-tos and how we're going to be ensured that when we test these, they're going to be done the same way every time at every school, and we're going to expect the same level of results. That meaning that we are currently in contract with 3 consultants. We want to make sure that all 3 consultants will actually test the water the same way every time. We do not want one testing lab to receive a 1-liter bottle, another testing lab to receive a 250 milliliter bottle. We want it to be very consistent so that we figure out how all this process is going to work on these 5 schools, so that we're assured that when we start this process, we won't run into any glitches along the way. We're figuring out all the problems right now. Our anticipation is that once we get all these glitches worked out on these 5 test schools, then we will consistently be testing between 10 and 12 schools every week in and week out, until every school we have, from the oldest to the newest that was built in 2017, will all be tested. As we find elevated levels along the way, we will step back and make repairs deemed on what we have found on these 5 test schools. We know what works now and what doesn't, how far we have to take it to get these levels reduced.
What were the levels? What were the levels?
Okay, somebody jumped in with another question. Do you want me to go through all 17 from the first test?
I guess the ones you retested at Union and Winston.
Okay, on the retest at Winston Academy, that was that 1 classroom that the valve stop was turned off. It hadn't been used in an undetermined time. It was at 1420. It retested on the second test at 311. And that was just making minor adjustments to the fixture, purging it, making sure the water was running clear, cleaning the aerator. But since then, this entire system has been removed and replaced.
You have to test that again then, right?
No, sir. We're lining this test up for either this afternoon to be drawn or tomorrow morning.
So it's gonna be retested. Does it have to read 0?
No, it has to fall below the 15 parts per billion, according to the EPA and what the school board has adopted as the level.
1420 down to 311, and then you have to get down to less than 15.
Yes,
So.
That is correct.
By replacing that fixture, you hope that that will be the third result, so to speak.
there's, short of repiping that entire system from that sink, we've done everything possible. If we cannot get these number below what we have adopted at the school district of being 15 parts per billion, then this will be repiped or taken out of service on that one location. At Union Academy, the level went, we had actually an increase here. It went from 38.7 to 48.9. That's the only case where it actually went up. It's still a close variance, but it's concerning.
And what are you doing for that one?
Like I said, all these fixtures on this second round of testing have been removed out of service and been replaced.
What would make it go up?
Undetermined,
So third round of testing is today
yes.
on these 5, or not even, these 2 schools now.
Yes, 2 schools.
Got it, okay.
Do you send out the samples, or do you test and analyze yourselves?
No, they go to an independent lab. Yes, Florida Spectrum. They sent us the lab report yesterday.
When did Polk County adopt the 15 parts per billion?
When this process started in the beginning here, in light of the news stories, I believe it was in Hillsborough County, the EPA recommends an action level of 20 parts per billion. Anything above that, the district has erred on caution that we're going to adopt the 15 parts per billion, which is the recommended level.
Is this something that should have been done years ago, before Hillsborough came in the news?
In the 90s, there was repairs made here. As technology changed and the EPA came out with warnings, there were a water cooler system, different manufacturers that had lead components within them. And that was mainly during the 90s that a lot of these water coolers were all removed out of service and upgraded with current standards, what was approved. But as far as testing the pipes, I can't say.
I understand that since you fixed the ones, there was a 10% random sampling at any particular school, correct? Am I right on that? So if there were
No, we conducted 30 samples at every school.
30 samples, and how many fixtures usually? I'm just trying to get a percentage in my head.
It varies between an elementary and a high school. A high school could have more than 30. An elementary school, we might only be able to find 20.
I guess my question is how will you know whether the ones that you didn't test are also still in good working order, or are you going to eventually have to go back and test all of those fixtures too?
No, I mean, we're pretty confident, and our consultants are confident, that once we do we conduct the 30 samples at a school, we have a good indication of where we're at as far as that school.
So the one in the gymnasium, I'm just using as an example, the one in the gymnasium didn't fall in your first round of tests, it wasn't 30 fixtures. Is that gymnasium water fountain ever going to be tested? And how, if it isn't, how will we know if it's?
A water fountain would be tested. I mean, that's the second most likely source that you're going to consume water. Outside of the kitchen, the water coolers are next on the list. And then it would drop down to sinks in the teacher planning area where they have a coffee pot or.
But let me approach the question differently. What happens to the fixtures, regardless of what they are, that weren't tested?
Those are deemed that they would be so far below the threshold of what would a person normally consume water from. We wouldn't test a sink in a restroom. There would be no reason to believe that someone would go in there and drink out of a faucet in a sink.
So at Union Academy, was every water fountain tested?
Yes,
You said it was 4 samples at Union?
there were originally 30.
What was 4?
Or drawn.
Still elevated?
There's 4 that are still elevated.
And what was the other school?
Winston Academy in Lakeland.
So you don't have to bring water into Cleveland Court or Inwood anymore, but you are still bringing water into Winston?
We are as a safety precaution, yes.
Is it safe to say that you have tested every water fountain in these 5 schools?
So any place where there was deemed to be a high enough likelihood of potential consumption was tested?
Yes.
Okay.
The EPA has a priority list of how you should come through your high priority action as far as testing, then medium, and then low. So we're going after the higher probability that somebody's going to consume water through that way. And the water fountains are highest, along with the kitchen. And then, of course, the bubblers that are in the elementary schools that are part of the kitchen or the classroom environment. Not many kids drink out of the bubblers, but they do.
Now, in the first two schools where it's been cleared, was that because something was replaced or that you were able to run the water and that seemed to have solved the issue?
They made minor repairs in there just by cleaning the aerator, flushing the system out. The one at Winston, I mean, it went from 1420 down to 311, a major drop. Some of the other ones that were tested at Inwood, it was 26.6. Just with minor adjustments, it went to 1.6.
You haven't done any testing since the 90s.
Mhm.
That's 20 years ago. Why did the school district not test for 2 decades?
I cannot answer to that. I haven't been here during that period of time.
What about the last 5 years? Why wouldn't the school be tested, especially seeing areas like Ferguson and then others in the news? I guess it's just like, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a parent, but if I was a parent, I would just hope and assume that my child's school didn't have lead, so knowing that the schools haven't been tested in the last 5 years even. Do you know why?
No, I can't answer that.
When did, from what I understand from a parent, when we were out here last week, Union Academy started giving bottled water to its students last year. Why would that have been?
I have no idea why Union Academy would be giving water to students. Last year?
They implemented a policy where kids should bring their own water bottles, I believe. So,
I'm not aware of that. Because we've had parents call and ask about could their child bring water bottles from home.
So just if I, somebody can type in if I'm missing details on this. We spoke with one parent who said that last year, I think you're right, that they said they started bringing in bottled water, or kids are bringing bottled water, and that they had changed the policy because they said it might be a disruption, the crinkling of the bottles and whatever became a topic of discussion. But again, this was like last school year. So I was wondering whether the school district had any inkling at that school, even that far back, that there might have been an issue with some of the water at that particular school.
I am not aware of any of that. I mean, this never came to light until we selected the 5 test sample schools that we were going to conduct at, just to see where the numbers were at.
So as far as you know, there was never any previous
No.
issue that came to light over at Union Academy?
No.
And I know we've asked you this before, but what prompted this? Testing.
The recent media coverage that's been going on, we've looked at articles from Hillsborough County, from Detroit, Michigan. There was an article that was sent to me this morning, all the way across the country. There's now concerns over water sampling. So it's become a hot topic right now. I mean, it's for us, we run through cycles.
and the testing will be continued until all the samples are lower than 15.
So wait,
No,
we test this afternoon and then send out, when do the new results come back?
We could expect them early next week.
You made repairs to Union Academy and to Winston, and you expect those to be fine.
The repairs have already taken place. It's just they were taking place after they drew the sample.
Would you expect them to come back fine though?
We're hopeful. There's no indication that they wouldn't. I was sharing this morning with someone that when a water line comes into a building, it's just one line into that building, and then it branches off to all the different functions that it serves. If the water coming into that building and the branches that go to 9 different locations are all fine and only one is wrong with an elevated level, that indicates to us that there's nothing wrong with the piping, there's nothing wrong with the water that's transmitted to these other 9 locations. There's something at that actual location that is giving the elevated readings. And what we've found is some of the valve stops we've taken out, they have an old type of valve stem that is wrapped with a lead cord that creates a seal. That potentially could leach into the water over years. There's no telling what it could be. We found stop valves that actually had a lead component seat when the gate would drop in there to seal the water off. So those are all potential reasons why we have elevated samples at only specific locations.
I know you said there were small adjustments made here and there to certain fixtures. Can you be a little bit more specific as to what those small adjustments would be? Probably like some.
Well, the one example at Winston Academy, the elevation was so high It just didn't make any sense. But then when we went there and talked with the consultant that drew the sample and our staff, they went out there and escorted them, this faucet had been turned off because the fixture itself leaked. When they turned the valve stop on, it was actually brown, cruddy water that came out of it. So at that point right there, it gave them concern that the type of sample we're getting could be skewed. But they flushed it for 30 seconds and they drew their sample. But since then, we've cleared the line, we've repaired the leak, and now this sink is functionally back in service. It's just not being used at this point. And when we draw samples now that we know we have, it's functioning properly, the aerator's been cleaned, there's no contaminants in the faucet or any of the components of that sink.
What about the schools that haven't been tested yet but might be older buildings? What do parents do? Are their kids just not drinking out of the water fountains right now?
That would be up to the parents. If they have concerns until we get through the testing, by all means, they could have their child bring water to there.
I think you guys said that there was a school built in 1914 in Haines City or something like that. Would you probably encourage those parents to, have their kids bring water?
Well, it's not-
Just until it's tested?
It's not necessarily, I've read one EPA report that they said new homes are just as susceptible to lead in it as the older ones. And they explained that with the theory that as the contaminants that go through the water and the minerals and deposits, they build up. If you've ever cut a galvanized pipe that's been in the ground for a lot of years, there's all this crusty, looks like the inside of a mine down through the center. And one report that I read indicated that those actually shield any contaminants that are in the solders or the fixtures or the lead that leaches into it. So we are attempting to go after the older schools first. That will be the direction we'll go, but we will test every school from oldest to newest. We're currently working with the 3 consultants to map out what is going to be the most efficient way to get through all schools the quickest to get the results.
Please just recap for me, the Winston Academy number is still much higher than you would like, obviously, even at 300.
Yes.
On the latest number. So there and at the Union Academy one, those 4, what takes place now? What happens?
Right now, we're at the point where we're going to test because we've already replaced the fixtures. Like I was saying earlier, the one sample actually elevated by 10 points. The others went from 45 to 23.9. We went from 682 to 385. And we went from 67 to 17.
That was just based on flushing and some minor adjustments.
Yes.
Now the whole fixture has been,
Everything has been replaced. There's nothing product from the wall where the actually supply comes out of the wall. And like I explained earlier, knowing that the water that's running through the walls goes to all the rooms. If it's only one room, it leads us to believe that what comes out of that wall from that point to where they receive the water, there's something wrong there. And that has all been replaced. This third set of testing on those 5 devices should clear that up.
it was just out of speculation that they actually came back and they were still elevated even after replacing that fixture. Then you have to start getting into the wall, is that correct?
Yes, then we have to investigate behind the wall. And the chances are then, like I had said last Friday, that there are other approaches where they inject the resin inside the pipe to seal whatever's in there, to shield it from the water source.
How long will the test results take from the rounds today?
We hope to have them back early next week. If they can draw samples this afternoon, they'll have them to the lab tomorrow.
When you say you're testing all schools, would that include charter schools as well, or not?
Yes.
That's included.
So a lot of parents, since this has kind of come to light here in Polk County, they've been kind of freaking out, for lack of better words. What do you say to quell their fears, especially in the schools that haven't even been tested yet?
That if you have concerns about the water they're receiving in the school, by all means, if they want to bring a water bottle to school to use until we're sure that their school's been tested and that the water is safe to drink, we have no indications that we have unsafe water out there that kids are drinking.
But how do you quell their fears that the school's doing the right thing? Because a lot of
Doing-
parents are saying, they haven't tested this long, why are they just doing it now? What do you have to say, to that, to the parents, and to the fact that you're handling this now?
We are going to assure that the water they receive is safe. We are going to test as quick as we can, get the results back, and if they do come back elevated, those will be taken out of service, and we'll make the necessary repairs and the retest.
let me see that I have this right. You start with 4 schools, you take 30 samples at each school, 120 in total. At 2 of the schools, 60 samples are now clean. Out of the other 60, 55 come back clean. There are only 5 out of 120 that are coming back funky. Is that true?
Yes. It was actually
So how-
150.
So my question to you is, how would you size up the progress so far?
We've made great strides. Out of 150 samples that have taken at 5 schools, in less than 2 weeks, we're down to 5 samples that are questionable. And we haven't gone to a huge expense to make these corrections. They've been minor, simple corrections. Outside of the testing, maybe between $50 and $200 in repairs, maybe slightly more.
I think one question that all of us would probably like answered is, it's been so long since the, initial tests happened 20-some years ago. Is there gonna be a new policy that you guys implement to test every so often rather than randomly every 20 years?
I believe we'll just continue to follow the EPA guidelines, the recommendations that are in there. We are always talking with our consultants, asking for their recommendations. There's changes all the time. There's other things that have come up that statutes have changed, and we adjust as per things that come out through the EPA or through the Florida legislation.
So thus far, the school has followed the EPA guidelines.
Yes.
I'm beyond EPA guidelines.
Excuse me?
I said the school's gone beyond the EPA guidelines. It's 20 and you're.
The EPA has a safe threshold at 15 parts per billion with an action level above 20 parts per billion. We've erred on caution that we're going to have our water samples at 15 parts per billion or lower.
So does the EPA have any guidelines in the timeframes, like she had just mentioned? Like
In the
we test
timeframes?
Every so many years, you don't have guidelines for that,
No.
so you are not gonna change that.
I mean, as these things came forward over the years, they determined that asbestos was bad for you, and then they determined lead was bad for you. So they made adjustments in the manufacturing of components. Since 1986, there's been no lead-lined or lead-containing water coolers. As fixtures have improved, they've now, I think it was in 2011, they no longer allow the brass fixtures and the components that potentially could have lead leach into the water. So there's constant changes being made. So we're relatively confident that newer schools have been built with modern components, that they're perfectly safe.
My last question, looking for a soundbite here. Obviously, the goal here is what? Safety for the kids?
Safe water for the students and staff.
Can you reiterate that?
I mean, we're going to go through any measure or whatever's needed to ensure that their safe water is supplied to them at each and every one of these schools. Assured that what's being used in the kitchens to cook with and what the kids are receiving after they've left pee and they go to a water fountain, that all this water is going to be safe for them. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.